This is Stardust Channel. In this episode we open the Stardust Channel Archives with the 1999 Astrological Association Eclipse Conference in Plymouth, the Great Eclipse Conference. For the first time, international astrologers gathered for the biggest astrology conference of its era, with hundreds of lectures exploring every facet of the field. A glimpse into a historic gathering where knowledge, vision and inspiration were exchanged, a time capsule of ideas and atmospheres that continue to resonate today. Join us as we travel back in time for the upcoming eclipse season.
If you were to ask an engineer to design a calendar that showed where the sun and the moon were in the sky, and you said you can do it any way you like, you'd discover very quickly that there's only one or two ways that can be done, and that is to produce a circular motif, a circular pattern in the ground, the Earth at the middle, which is where we live, and on that basis you would produce 28 markers, and the moon would be moved one marker anti-clockwise every day, and the sun would be moved one marker anti-clockwise every 13 days. And this makes quite an effective calendar, where the circle becomes the sky or the zodiac. And how interesting then to find at Stonehenge an original part of the design where twice 28 are used to formulate a great big year circle. By using twice 28, you can then use this model to predict eclipses to the day over long periods of time. And therefore we've now got to work to understand just what our ancestors were up to. And it's no use any longer saying they were actually only building stone axes and living short, horrible and brutish lives, because some of them, perhaps not all of them, some of them were looking to the stars for the first time, and they were doing it in Britain and in northern France and in Ireland and parts of Scandinavia, because each year they were building 5 of these shapes. For 1,500 years, they were building 5 of these every year. And that's quite an undertaking. Would you like to build one of these shapes with 50-ton stones, carrying them tens of miles? Perhaps you'd like to think about that, and then write to your nearest archaeology department.
My interest in astrology and history and mythology all date back to a moment of revelation when I was about 7 years old, when I heard a radio program about the myths of Greece and Rome, and I was suddenly obsessed. It was like I came alive for the first time. And so the myths of Rome led me straight into the study of ancient history and of mythology, and about the same time horoscopes were starting in newspapers. I became very fascinated by astrology, and astrology and history are both ways of looking at what happens when time passes and working out how we got to where we are now. So they're highly compatible disciplines. I studied history at university. At the same time I became aware of how astrology was used in the past, and I've always, since then, I've been an astrologer in all sorts of different ways, but my two loves are using astrology to look at history and using history to discover about astrology. And so the Great Year is really not an astrology book, it's using history to look at astrology. It's about the beliefs people have had about cosmology, astronomy, how they've applied those to history, to organising their societies, and how astrology played a role in this as well. I think in enabling people to make choices, plan the future, try and arrange the future, avoid crises, and so on.
Now, the basic idea here is this. Very early on, the ancient peoples noticed something very peculiar about the universe. And that is, down here, it was a screaming, raging mess, and up there, it was perfectly orderly. Every day, the cosmos turned in 24-hour revolutions. Even if you couldn't always see it, the sun always rose, culminated, and set. The stars did the same. The planets, once they understood them, also turned to be moving in repeated patterns with perfect regularity, although it's only really in modern times that we've got that regularity down quite precisely. But they recognized very early on that everything off planet Earth, only they wouldn't have called it a planet, everything off the center of the world in which we live, is how they would have regarded it, was perfectly regular. Therefore, it came to be the dominant position in the spiritual philosophies of ancient times that the regular movement of the heavens was the single most visible evidence of divine activity. I call this, and so do others, the stellar theology. That the movements of the stars and the heavens are the single most visible evidence of divine will. Nomus takes the view that the study of astronomy is one of the best ways to tune the soul to the movements of the divine. And this is one of the first and earliest reasons given for studying astrology. This is repeated, by the way, by Ptolemy in the Tetrabiblos, that the contemplation of the movements of the stars will, in and of itself, begin to make one's soul come into tune with the divine. You will be dealing with that issue. The moment you are born absolutely, positively, irrevocably determines that you will have a Saturn return at the age of 29. That you will have a Jupiter return at the age of 12. And you will have all of your transits, directions, and progressions on dates that are totally predetermined. You have no choice in the matter. This means, astrologically speaking, that the order and timing with which you deal with issues in your life is in fact totally predetermined. How you deal with them isn't. That's the Hjelmborg of astrology. You have no choice in the order in which you are going to deal with the planetary energies. You have enormous choice about what you do with them, I believe, but I have to go into that in greater length. By the way, let me make one thing absolutely clear. Most of the time, confronted with most issues, you do not have much of any choice at all, but this is not fate. It's because of the things you've done previously, which have eliminated certain kinds of choices already.
The moon's nodes, I see them rather like umbilical cords. At the same time, you have the birth channel and the death tunnel. And so I linked that lecture with the Bible, but also with an Indian story about the demons, Rahu and Ketu, how the demon was beheaded when it actually stole some of the nectar of immortality. And Shiva ordered the sun and the moon to behead the demon. So the head lived on and got a snake's body. And the body of the demon got the head of a snake. So again, we have the body and the head and the snake. So there are extremely interesting links to the nodes, to the eclipses, in the Indian mythology and in ours as well. I mean, the Bible is also our mythology, isn't it? Well, I think my astrology is strongly influenced by the Hindu astrology, but not that I'm practicing sidereal astrology. You may know that we do have common roots, astrological roots with the Indians. We just have to go 2,500 years back, and the astrologers were the same. And then they split. So what I do practically is that I've seen the meanings of, say, the houses, the way the Indians interpret the houses of the horoscope. You can apply these meanings directly to Western astrology. They have the same planets as we have. And in India, astrology has been honored and practiced for thousands of years. And astrology was banned in Europe for hundreds of years. So it's like a treasure house in India. We can really learn a lot from them.
And so
I came to study the personality of Nostradamus. But again, there were lots and lots of books on him, but many of those books are mystifying him and seeing him as that great prophet and a great seer. And I like to start with the fact that Nostradamus was just a human being like you and me. Nowadays, if an astrologer is working with palmistry and with tarot, it's okay. But when I started to learn astrology, I still remember that people were fighting that and saying you are blurring astrology and you're mixing it up. And you see, it was no different 500 years ago. That Nostradamus was not a good astrologer. And so if he was not a good astrologer, what he writes is that many of the visions he had was using a magic mirror and a polished metal and flames, is a special ritual and invocations, that he used that, and that afterwards he used astrology for calculating when it was going to happen and how it was going to happen. We now know that it is very difficult to believe that he used astrology for that. So we must go now to the idea that most of the things he must have done with magic or with visions of his clairvoyancy, and not only with astrology. Maybe he hardly used astrology. But you will find astrology in his work. And there are many other, but you see also astrology books. Marschall. This is the Magnis Conjunctionibus. This is about the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. And it's a very, very important old work. And if you take that book and take Nostradamus, you will see that he took much of that book on the Jupiter-Saturn, although he doesn't mention it. And it was Lee Lehman was confirming that, because Lee is doing classical astrology. He said, well, the tables from that time were not correct. And so by the time that you get to the eclipse of today, which is mentioned by Nostradamus, 1999, it is very well possible that Nostradamus hasn't even meant 1999 if he had mentioned that year, if he had had the right tables. So the tables were, if you proceed in time, many, many years off. And Nostradamus did something with eclipses, but much more with the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction.
I think that the rise and fall of astrology more or less follows this curve. It's big in classical times, and then it falls off quite sharply. And then it creeps along through the Middle Ages almost on rock bottom. And then after about 1200 or so, it climbs up. It goes big in the Renaissance, and then sharply after about 1650, certainly in England and also in the rest of Europe, I think, it declines equally sharply. In the 17th and 18th centuries, it is virtually extinct. It climbs again in the 19th century. There is a little blip in about 1950, which is that little sharp point in the curve. And then we're high up and booming, which is the generation that you represent. Everybody knows their chart. Everybody loves to talk about where they've got their Saturn or their Venus or whatever. And you can see the shape of this, even if the time scale is a bit on the wonky side. We have boom, bust, boom, bust, boom.
Jung had already told Freud in an earlier letter that he considered the study of astrology essential for a proper understanding of mythology. And now here he is enthusiastically casting his patients' horoscopes to assist the analytic process. Freud's response was surprisingly tolerant. Jung was to remain faithful to astrology for the rest of his days. On the one hand, he saw in it, as in alchemy, a forerunner of his depth psychology and the earliest systematic typology, still the best typology, I think. While on the other hand, he used it as a means of testing his theory of synchronicity and of demonstrating the way in which archetypes are constellated. Together with Dr. Liliana Frey-Rohn, a colleague and gifted astrologer, he collected 360 horoscopes of husbands and wives and compared the 50 most important aspects that might be characteristic of marriage. Although this was too small a sample from the statistical point of view, the results were encouraging.
My name is Rick Levine, and actually my middle name is Merlin, and my friends think of me as a wizard. And I've been studying astrology for nearly 30 years now, and it came to me very early on in my life, and it was very profound and powerful, and I'm very much concerned and in love with how astrology and science and religion are coming to a nexus at this time in civilization, and the power of what will happen when the new is confronted by the origins of the new and create something that I don't think any of us can quite imagine. And this is the Kepler College of Astrological Arts and Sciences that I am a founding trustee of. So I've been very much involved in the reintegration of astrology into the mainstream, into the academic movement, not because I feel we need respect from them. I don't care about respect from them because I don't respect them, them, whoever they are. And we left, many of us left that environment, so I'm not coming back to try to get respect from that environment. What I'm trying to do, and many other astrologers also are, is to set up institutions that will train new generations of astrologers not as excluded, but as included into the culture and into the fabric where astrology should be, not because we deserve it, but because it's important for humanity, it's important for civilization to reintegrate rather than to separate. I think that part of the problem of where we are is that astrology and academics and religion for too many centuries have been run by the boys. Guys talking about guy stuff, conquering nature, mastering nature, figuring out the laws, and so you can manipulate it and control it. And I think it's very important that modern science is rediscovering its vulnerabilities, and it's falling apart over this last century. Even physics, the hardest of all the hardcore sciences, has become soft. Today, theoretical physicists are delving into areas of consciousness because they've begun to realize that it's not about mechanical billiard ball, this affects that kind of a thing. It's more about the subtle interactions.
As we look ahead in the millennial spirit, I think we find that there are frontiers of research opening up for all fields with a renewed enthusiasm. There's something about going into a new millennium or a new century which makes everybody very energetic about learning more. And I think that in astrology, the greatest research that can be done is in illness research. Someone far more gifted in medical research than I am, although I have started the ball rolling. I'm an analyst with the psychodynamic development more than I am a medical astrologer, but I'm trying to excite people to do more research there. We have to do more research there. We have to do more research into the astrology of nations. Mm-hmm. Each nation has a horoscope. Sometimes it's very hard to detect or find because we don't know when they were begun. But we know, for example, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a certain day, in a certain year, Israel was born. And that horoscope is extremely reliable, and we can help understand political change in this world. I think the third and one of the weakest places in astrology is in managing the environment, understanding changes of climate and things like that. It would seem that that is a natural for astrology, but it is one of the most elusive dimensions. Perhaps God did not intend for astrology to reflect the rest of his work, if you will. The winds and the rains and things. I don't know. Mm-hmm. It certainly detects the internal weather. Why not the external weather? I think there is a great deal to be gained on the research frontier that has really matured rapidly in this last half of this century, which is the bonding of psychology with astrology, because it is extremely enriching for both.
You know, there are different astrologies which are going their own way, and I find some of them very interesting, like the study of astrology in relation to financial cycles is very interesting. But it's quite clear that what appeals to people most about astrology is the personal insights it offers. And whether astrology is true or false in scientific terms is completely irrelevant to the fact that there is no other form of psychology now that enables people to gain those personal insights. All other models of psychology just exist in universities and in hospitals. Astrology is the only one which has a popular appeal. It has the 12 simple zodiac archetypes. Anybody can find out with sun sign astrology which one they're born under. Anybody can start straight away reading about themselves, get the idea that they themselves and the people around them have psychological complexes, patterns, impulses, behavior. Nothing else does that. And so I think that's what astrology's use is. Maybe something else will supersede it, but at the moment it's all there is, and without it people are just machines.
And here we are having this eclipse. So here we have this eclipse. The moon is coming across the face of the sun. This, we can see a new moon. When can we ever else see a new moon? It's in the dark, but we can see it because it's crossing the face of the sun. So here is the dark goddess with a halo around her. It's beautiful. And it's again the illumination of the black goddess.
What have we got now? 20. No question about it, did you hesitate?
When the moon is on the eclipse and full on you, then eclipses can occur, and that happens twice a year. The moon's nodes. Can you hold that one up? Can you stand up?
All right, this is the chalice, and I was going to Glastonbury, and I decided to get a chalice and consecrate it on an annular eclipse. It's been used in Glastonbury, the Great Pyramid, Mount Sinai, the Tomb of Christ, back to Glastonbury, and now the eclipse. I've got mixed sacred waters that I took from the 2 wells on Lammas morning at sunrise. So I'm fully prepared to celebrate this changing of good and evil.
Let's move it.
Vitam, tuas lumen mundi, invocamos te conquis nomebus tuis, videlicit in Arabico Yazimiz, in Latino Sol, in Chaldeo Maher, in Romano Lehuz, in Indiano Araz, tu es lux mundi et eos lumen, in medio planetarum existis, tu es qui generationem tua virtute, et calore facis in mundo, in tui loci sublimatus, quaesimus te, qui ex radus totius firmamente, et erga nos habeas pietatum, et in nostris precibus tibi factis, et rationes advertas ad esto nobiscum.
I was sitting on a hill with a group of astrologers who are friends of mine, and we were sitting in a line like this in the grass. And when the darkness came, or more precisely, when the light went out, I had a feeling in my body, a very shivery feeling, a sort of a thrill that runs up the body, but that's completely unexpected. It's not on a mental level, but on an animal level. The animal inside me recognized something very strange, and there was a very, very powerful feeling of awe.
Although the sun was not clearly visible, the whole experience of gradually the coming of the dark, and then actually fairly suddenly, when it really was dark, and then moving up again, I think it reminds us all of the shadow side and the more hidden sides of our own personalities, and how we might want to be expressing those and bringing some of them into the light. Yes, as a counselor you have to work with both sides, and as one of the other lecturers was saying, and unfortunately I can't pronounce his name right, Marschall, but from Slovenia, he was talking that the counselor must be aware of both his or her own shadow or unconscious as well as the client's. Mm-hmm. And this is important. It's a part of the process. Much of what we're trying to do with astrology is to bring more awareness, and the more aware I can be as a counselor, the more I can help my client to also be aware. And in that sense, my clients are limited to the degree that I am limited, and that's true for any counselor. Whatever my blind spots are, I won't be able to illuminate those for other people. And that's why it's important for me to continue to try to grow and extend and try to understand whatever it is that's beyond me at this point.
We see a conscious part with the ego as the center, the personal unconscious and the collective unconscious. And in this figure, you can actually say that if you get connected to the deeper layers of the collective unconscious, there is no time and no space. You can connect to anybody else, and you can get information. It comes back through your personal unconscious layer, and then can be seen by your ego. What does this mean? This means that every clairvoyant feeling or hunch or intuition or whatsoever always gets some coloring through your complexes. And the more you are repressing, the more colored your feelings and your hunches will be. So if you are not working hard on yourself, you can get the right information at this level, but you will produce the wrong information at that level because of your own problems have interfered with handling the information properly. It means that if you are repressing a lot of, let's say, complexes around authorities, then what you get is everything is colored by those complexes. And if you repress your shadow, everything that comes through you will get shadow qualities. And that means that if you repress your shadow, the chance that you are going to get hunches of really bad things are going to be bigger and bigger and bigger.
I'm here because I want to meet the eclipse in me. And meeting the eclipse in me is seeing my blind spots in my character and seeing where my fears are and where my blockings are, or where I have too much of control need, or where in what way I cannot release spirituality or love or so, you know. So that's why I'm here, and that's why I'm really excited. I'm not excited about seeing the outer event. I'm excited about, it's like during the eclipse, the inner and outer will be together, you know, more than usually. Of course, there's this prenatal eclipse, which is very important. That is the eclipse that was happening just right before you were born, and that point is an energy point in your horoscope. And so I watch sometimes, not always, but sometimes I watch transits to that point. Mm-hmm. Or maybe there are also eclipse returns, you know. After 19 years, the eclipses will come back to the same place as they were before. So when there is an eclipse going on, you are being put in touch with what was happening 19 years ago in your life.
The key point this is making is, earlier I said that the degree of an eclipse or of a great conjunction creates a sensitive point in the zodiac that may live for years and have impact for many years after the eclipse or conjunction. Well, the same appears to be true about the areas touched by the path on the Earth. It's as if that point of the Earth is imprinted in some way, and that future events flow around and up to the path, and the path in some way delimits or defines an area of historical movement.
In the early part of 1996, Pluto went into Sagittarius briefly and went out again. Got a client. He said, well, you've been helping me to work with my partner in the faults that I have in the faults. Well, I have a huge business deal going on, and my rival is trying to buy up an industry that I am trying to buy up. And if I get his chart and show it to you, you can tell me his weaknesses, and then I can wipe him out. And I thought, wow, this is wonderful, but not for the reasons he thought. And he said, I said, no, I can't do that. And he said, think about it for a while. I said, no, I can't do that. But the whole time I'm thinking, Pluto is opposing my sun. What an amazing thing to have this foreign devil trying to seduce me into doing something incredibly wicked. This is brilliant. So we had a discussion which was quite interesting, and it lasted in my mind because he ended up by saying, would you, if I was, because we had this kind of moral thing, no. And then I said I'd lose my gift. That's why I can't. Because I worked with witch doctors in Africa for many years, and if you falsify or you lose your integrity, the spirits take away your gift. Boom, gone. So there's no way. So I said no, I can't. Now the thing is, what he was offering, first of all, he was offering a box at the opera, and second of all, lots and lots of money. Well, the money was easy because it's so obvious, you know. I mean, anybody who falls for that hasn't been paying attention to the last 2,000 years. But a box at the opera.
My first boyfriend, when I was 16 years old, he walked me to school, and we went out together for 2 years, and that's a long time when you're teenagers. He was the first man to kiss me, all these things, you know. And we've both been away, and we've both married other people, we've both been married twice. And we've kept in touch over the years with Christmas cards and things. And as I say, last November there was a reunion of our old crowd, and somehow we got together and wham bam, wahoo! We both have progressed moon going through Taurus, which is lovely, and we're thoroughly enjoying it.
You're like the sun and the moon.
Yeah, absolutely. And there just was no question. This was the next thing to do in my life. But quite disruptive. I mean, we've both agreed it's been totally disruptive. And this is all, I mean, for astrologically, it's all part of Pluto squaring the moon, or squaring the sun. Pluto squaring Venus, squaring the sun, and now squaring the moon. So, you know, this has been going on and building up for some time. I've also got Neptune going over my descendant, opposite my Pluto, squaring my Saturn. It happened the same week in November as my second Saturn return, and it was also my second progressed full moon the same week when we got together. So astrologically, there were so many things coming together.
Early dreams are often an indication of a person's true purpose in life. Jung saw the phallus as an unnameable subterranean god, which compensated for the shams of conventional Christianity and its repressive attitude towards sex. Freud had triggered a necessary release of repressed material when he let the sexual cat out of the bag at the beginning of the century. Jung became his crown prince, but felt increasingly that one dogma was being substituted for another. Above all, it was over the issue of sexuality's place in psychology that they fell out. For Freud, libido referred only to sexual energy, whereas Jung saw it as psychic energy in general, which may have many goals, especially a spiritual one. The rise of the great god sex has continued to the present and casts an ever darker shadow. Moloch-like, it is consuming its millions, especially in Africa, through the spread of AIDS, that plague that emerged when Pluto was in Scorpio. And in the post-Christian, post-Freudian West, sexual disinhibition has insidiously undermined the foundations of society, contaminating the lives of our children and curtailing their freedom. Maybe something to do with Pluto and Sagittarius, that nanny state won't let you do anything. Everything's too dangerous. Children mustn't go out. They aren't allowed to do anything any longer. They've got to be controlled, ferried to and fro to school and so on. While the great god sex was rising, it seemed to Jung that the god of his clergyman father and of the churches was in decline. In Basel, Nietzsche announced the death of God, and in the same city, Jung, aged 11, had an unthinkable thought and a horrifying vision that was to change his religious orientation and indeed his life. He was in the cathedral square one glorious day and visualized God sitting far above on his golden throne. He struggled for 3 days to block out what wanted to come next. Then he let go. From under the throne, an enormous turd falls on the sparkling new roof, shatters it, and breaks the walls of the cathedral asunder. Jung deduced from this that God, like man, who was created in his image, has a dark as well as a light side.
Was she an amalgam of all three Liliths? Actually, I created this piece with a theater group before I really knew about the different Liliths. And I really started to work with Lilith from a dream. I had a dream first before I even knew she was astrological or astronomical. And the piece came from working with Sumerian mythology, where Lilith appears in the myth of Inanna, who is the queen of heaven and earth. And Lilith is the dark maid in the tree that Inanna has taken out of a river and planted in her garden, the original Garden of Eden. And she wants this tree to grow so it can give her wood for her throne of queenship and her bed of marriage. You wonder, who am I coming at you like your shadow of the night? I come forth in the morning, fair as the moon, clear as the sun, and terrible like an army of banners. I walk in the sun, and I drink with the bees. I sing with the rocks. Rocks! And I do as I please. But Lilith, cuts right through it. There she is. Especially in Sagittarius, the sign of the truth seeker. She's gonna say it. To me, Sagittarius is about imagining, envisioning what is it that we want to see in the future. How do we imagine our lives to be? How do we imagine, work with images that then we believe in and that become true for us and then embody because we believe that strongly. But that is a question here. What do you believe in and why? That's a Pluto and Sagittarius question right there. But you get the black goddess, the black moon in there too. She's really going to scrutinize your belief systems and cut right through with a new level of truth that, are you resisting that? You know, are you afraid of that tree? You know, what does that truth mean for your life, and how are you then going to change that? Now, you get a bit of time. Now, I think the Venus retrograde cycle is incredibly potent in this chart, but also that Venus goes retrograde back to 18 Leo is extraordinary. On September 11th, she stations direct at 18 at the eclipse point. So, and then she comes back, you know, so this is really stirring up this deep process of creating something new and vital by being in touch with this depth, this powerful life force, and feeling that.
Now, when it comes to the eclipses and the nodes, we also find some very interesting links to mythology. In the Bible, Genesis chapter 3, the expulsion from paradise, we have the snake, we have the opening of the eyes, and their eyes were opened, as it said, and they could distinguish between good and evil and became like gods, as it says in the text. The moon's nodes is called dragon's head and dragon's tail, as you know. It has very much to do with the awakening and the dilemma of having a consciousness, because before expulsion from paradise, man had no knowledge of existence, of his own existence, rather like vegetables, and they had no sex, no gender. So consciousness was born, and love was born with the expulsion from paradise.
Because there's something that is invisible, there's something, even we as human beings, we start off as two tiny seeds or a seed in a container that come together, and somehow we manifest these living, animated, geometric forms that are really crystals. I mean, we're actually organic crystals. And so what is the nature of how these crystals grow? First in an amniotic fluid in the mother's womb, and then by taking in substances and transforming it, what is the nature of which things manifest into 3 dimensions? And these are the questions that Plato asked and that Pythagoras asked and the great thinkers of all times. The magic of astrology is that we get a chance to understand how the nature of harmony and of number and its repetitive measurements actually interfere and create physical manifestation. The first new aspects from the time of Ptolemy, the Ptolemaic aspects are divisions of a circle based upon the 12 signs. The magic of 12, Kepler said, had nothing to do with nature. It was to do with number. It was convenient. And so Kepler said that the signs and houses were artifacts. They were not as important. They worked. He didn't say they didn't work, but they were not important as we thought they were. And in fact, he said that all aspects were mathematical. And this was a new leap, because prior to that, aspects were more sign-oriented. And so Johann Kepler divided the circle into harmonics. And Kepler also wrote extensively on music and a lot of very technical material on music, and the concept of the music of the spheres, which came from Pythagoras, was reawakened in Kepler's work. And so he takes a circle and divides it by 1, and we get a conjunction, and 2, by 2 we get an opposition. 360 degrees divided by 2 is 180. And he divides it by 3 and gets a trine, and by 4 and gets a square, and by 5, well, that doesn't fit into the system of 12. And Kepler said, herein lies a problem. And he hypothesized, no, he didn't hypothesize, he actually stated and proved from his observations that an aspect of 1/5, which he called a quintile, quint from 5. And that same root in English has words like quintessence, quintessential, even the connection between, the magic of the 5 fingers on the hand, or the pentagram, which is the symbol of the hidden and the occult. Well, Johann Kepler said that the quintile, 72 degrees, 360 divided by 5, and 2 quintiles, 72 and 72 is 144, that the quintile and biquintile were important aspects. It manifests magic, and magic has been suppressed. It's a feminine energy. It's part of this whole thing of, as astrologers, we get distracted by events rather than finding the empty space and the feeling and the magic and what is hidden or occulted. Back to Albert Einstein just for a moment. And that is, Albert Einstein's chart has a quintile yod. I call them golden yods because they're based on the golden mean. So he has a golden yod interlaced perfectly symmetrical with one of these flattened yods, what I call a golden triangle. So that in fact, he has 6 out of 10 points on a 10-pointed star, perfectly represented by planets in his chart. And we have accurate data on Albert Einstein also. But these don't fit into regular aspect patterns, so we wouldn't even notice it. Yet what are the chances of these extraordinary people having this kind of symmetry?
There's my little notes.
Very quintile.
I've just been to see the Rick Levine lecture, which I thought was very, very powerful. His presentation, his delivery was incredible. His message was very important, I think, for all astrologers. His thesis really, and I think this is something that he has been pushing for many, many years, 20, 25 years, is that astrologers, and he did demonstrate this to us before we even started by asking for a show of hands on who uses squares, who uses aspects, who uses squares, who uses oppositions, and so on. Of course, we all use these things. Who uses the semi-squares, right? Going down to the semi-sextiles and so on. Most people use them. Who uses quintiles? Very few people actually are using them in their everyday practice. And then he went on to demonstrate to us why we should use quintiles. And I think he's convinced most of us that we really should. From the point of view of the incredible importance of the harmonic of the quintile, how it fits into the physical structure of the universe, for example, with the golden mean ratio of 1.61803, which is found in all growing things. You can't look at a daisy, you can't look at a cauliflower, you can't look at a tree, you can't look at your own body, you can't look at anything in the universe, even the proportion of one planet to another. For example, the number of days that the Earth takes to go around the Sun divided by the number of days that Venus takes to go around the Sun is 1.61803, the golden mean, and so on. So everywhere you look, you find this phi or golden mean ratio. So he demonstrated this at great length and very adequately, very convincingly. And then he showed us a number of charts of people who you would look at the chart and you would say, yes, this shows this person, but how come they became Churchill? How come they became Bob Dylan?
It seems to me that astrology only exists within a cultural context. Okay, and that cultural context is people's views of astronomy. Astrology and astronomy used to be the same thing. Now they're not. People think of astronomy as to do with the physical universe. And there is a developing and growing group of people, historians of astronomy, who are looking at the cultural context of astronomy. So folk beliefs about the stars, astronomical alignments and so on. These people aren't astrologers, but their work directly relates to the history of astrology as well. So I've become part of that whole network of people. They're not that many, a small group of people, but there is a network and there are publications. And that's a personal broadening out for me. And it also relates to the work I'm doing for my PhD, which is titled Prophecy, Cosmology and the New Age Movement, but I'm looking at belief in astrology. I know that all sensible astrologers, if they're asked if they believe in astrology, say no, I don't believe in it, I use it. But it's a convenient phrase, belief in astrology. And so I'm looking at that and what astrologers believe astrology is. And again, in a bigger context. And I'm taking that work to the cultural astronomers and the archaeoastronomers and telling them what I'm doing and they tell me what they're doing. So it's very fertile territory, lots of ideas exchanged.
It's really a matter of the person recognizing that the astrological planets are just symbols. They symbolize drives within our own nature. And we can use that same drive in a number of different ways. If we think about the planet Mars, who's often called the god of war, yes, Mars can denote aggression and anger and fights and argument, but Mars is also the energy to do anything that you want to do. So it's very good for initiation, for starting new projects, and for something that you desire in a very intense way. One of the best ways to use Mars, in fact, if you're not sure what else to do with it, is making love, because that's an intense form of desire, something that you really want. But anything that is a personal, where you could put the sentence, I want, and fill in the blank, is probably a good use of Mars. Oh yes, I definitely use it in my own life. I believe in thinking positive, and when you're looking ahead to say, okay, what are some of the ways that I can express this? If there's an aspect coming up that on the downside shows potential power struggles or fights with authority figures, instead maybe we can do something competitive in the sports world, or start a heavy exercise regime, or start your own business. There's other ways to direct it.
I'm an astrologer who really bases my work on the consultation, not on theory, but on working with people and seeing how it affects their lives. And when I was 15, I discovered astrology, and it suddenly, the things that people told me about the world didn't make sense to me then. And when I discovered astrology, all of a sudden I could put things into some kind of order, I suppose. And as I was saying earlier, I resisted astrology for a long time, but finally I realized when I was about 24 that my real gift was as an astrologer, because something very special happened in the consultation. There was a magical energy. Now, I don't know if magic is the right word, an energy of another kind that would come in. This weekend, I was speaking a little bit about the eclipse, and on the way to my talk, I had a thought, because we talk a lot about the shadow and the light in the eclipse, about the light going out, and which we of course experience today. But the thought I had was that it was also a moment to become aware of the shadow. That it was also something that we could suddenly become conscious of that normally is not available to us. And it seems there's a lot of going back and forth on that here at the moment. Yes, I've just written a book. And in fact, I just handed the manuscript in last week. And it's a book on psychological patterns in families. I'm working with astrological patterns over generations. It's called Planetary Threads. And I think a lot of people get interested in this, but I'm looking for a way to identify or to trace something that repeats over generations. And once it's identified, say there's a Mars-Moon aspect, then to understand what is the meaning of this pattern, which we as astrologers can identify, and how to work with that with people. So that's a very important part of my work.
The way in which genetics is reported, it's always very materialistic and deterministic. Journalists are always talking about whether there is a gene for homosexuality, a gene for criminal behaviour, a gene for being good at this or that, a gene for playing the violin, which I think is totally ridiculous, and serious geneticists do as well. but that's the way it comes through the media. And that is a sort of, all the time, a subliminal propaganda to people, telling them they are just machines. And astrology tells them something else. Astrology is, in fact, a subversive propaganda that tells people they are unique, and that whatever the church or the state or academic orthodoxy tells them, they are something different. They have a will of their own.
My experience of people who have Pluto in the 10th house is that whether they're in disguise or not, they do believe they have a mission. That's Pluto in the 10th in a sign. To hold the world together because it's falling apart in some way. And so what I'm thinking, and this depends on your chart, but when Pluto goes over your midheaven, any tendency towards missionary zeal, any tendency to think you have something has to be done, you know, and I'm the one to do it, I'm sure would get activated. Now, if it's squaring personal planets, it's very tricky, because if it's squaring either Pisces or Virgo, you don't want to do anything. You don't want to be that kind of person, ugh, you know. But it offers you a vision I'll say a vision because it's Sagittarius. It offers you a vision of something that needs to be part of the future, something that needs to be said.
All the things that I have gone to in this conference, the death of astrology, astronomy, astrology, the millennium path to astrology, and under the shadow of the moon, all of these have dealt with the geometries, the measurements in terms of what we can see, the structures of astrology and traditional understandings which date back way before the Egyptians, you know, Neolithic, probably even further back. So we're talking about thousands of year traditions, and the eclipse for me is on my Saturn. And what is the planet of tradition but Saturn, and also the planet of scientists? So what I've been doing with this whole theme has been following geometries, traditions, and very Saturnian subjects.
I've got a natal fixed T-square involving Uranus at 15.5 of Leo, again coming up with the Mars in Taurus at 18.
Okay, so Uranus is in Leo natally.
Yes.
And
I've got Mars in Taurus in the second at 18 degrees.
Okay, and it's square
and
Mars.
I've got Jupiter natally at 24 degrees of Scorpio. And I'm enjoying at the moment obviously a Uranus opposition combined with the Saturn.
Yep. So we've got transiting Uranus here, and transiting Saturn's coming up to your Mars, or is there? Okay. Okay, the Uranus opposition, as we talked a little bit, is very much the time to be, I've lost, where are you? I need to, yes, there. The time to be freeing yourself from old scripts, to be doing your own thing in the world, particularly with this natal T-square. Jupiter, Uranus, Mars all want freedom. Slightly different ways, but they all want freedom. Mars, I just want to do what I want to do, to heck with the world, get out of my way, go for it. Uranus, I need to be free of boundaries, of constraints, of limitations, of anything that would hold me back from being myself. And Jupiter, I need to be free to search for the truth, for the meaning, the enlightenment. I have to be out there on the road looking for answers, questing. So they all in their own way have that restless need to move. Don't pin me down, don't fence me in, don't hold me back in any way. Transiting Uranus, of course, agrees with all that. Yeah. Transiting Saturn says, wait a minute. You know, hold your horses, slow down, don't do it so fast. Transiting Saturn is going to have the hardest time with this T-square, because the natal T-square all votes with transiting Uranus. So that's the danger here, that most of the factors are egging each other on. Yes, take chances, be radical, go for it, be out there, yeah. And Saturn's saying, do your homework. Do your homework first, then go for it.
Being born on the day of an eclipse is significant for you only if you become significant. It does not make you significant. So all the megalomaniacs in the room who have a close prenatal eclipse, relax. You still have to make your own destiny. Sorry about that. Okay, the problem is this current eclipse is so spectacular in its astrological symbolism that I would be unwilling to say this eclipse may not mean much. I suspect it's going to mean quite a bit, and I'll talk about that at the end of the lecture, my own opinions about this eclipse. The terrestrial longitude of the beginning and end of an eclipse path is highly significant. This suggests that the eclipse's dominant symbolism is that somehow the elements themselves are in a maximum state of tension. Now, what is the realm of the four elements? The realm of the four elements is planet Earth. Remember, those of you that heard my lecture the other night, in the center of the diagram, in the center of all the celestial spheres, was the sphere of the four elements. That is the Earth itself. It suggests that this eclipse represents a stress or strain in ordinary reality that is reaching an absolute peak boiling point condition.
When we talk about the ecliptic plane, by the way, I might as well define these things, we're talking about the line that connects the Earth and the Sun through their centers. Okay, if we take the Sun over here and we take the Earth over here, we draw a straight line from their two centers and spin one around the other, okay, that creates the ecliptic. That line, that sweep, and it becomes a fundamental plane. This plane has to do with life or spirit, without mass. Okay, it's light or spirit without mass. So if you combine the ecliptic plane with the equatorial plane, which is the fundament of the Earth, we have living body. Okay? We have the manifold life as it is on the Earth. The interplay of those two planes describes the ebb and flow of life on the Earth. So let's look at these great circles. Here's the North Pole, right? This is what it all spins on. So this whole thing is the South Pole. Right? Matter of fact, we'll even put it right where it's supposed to be for this particular horoscope. We have a new kind of an astrocartography here. There's our world. Kind of puts it in perspective, doesn't it? Makes a little more sense out of it. We're dealing with real stuff on the planet. It's like, this is real stuff. You can feel it. You can touch it. You can go out to these places and point up and say, yes, that's where my Jupiter was when I was born. Right? At this location, on this place on the Earth. How we determine where a planet is on the ecliptic is we drop a great circle from the North Pole of the ecliptic through the planet in question to the ecliptic and call it, that's its degree. Even if it's up here, even if it's over here, that's its ecliptic degree.
Okay, so for 35 years, Lois Rada has been collecting this data for a wide network of people that when anything happens in the world, there are people who are local to that place who go to the registries and get the birth data. There is a network, she has a network of data collectors, and they compare notes and they give each other data and check each other. If it came from birth certificate, it's double A. If it came from memory, it's an A. From biography, it's a B. If we're not sure about the accuracy, it's a C. And if there's many people saying that, like Ronald Reagan has 6 different birth times, that's called dirty data. So all of this data is rated for how accurate it is. It comes with a biography, a short biography. All of the birth data is here, and then she always writes where it came from. And then she has some elves working for her that take the biography and turn this into characteristics. There's
characteristics?
There's 800 characteristics. that we use to classify the data. So we have body traits, mind traits, high IQ, low IQ, personality traits, and we're very conservative. We only choose these traits if they're very much an exemplar of this trait, because we want to make sure that if anyone does a study on shyness, that it's really going to show up in the chart. And diagnoses, we have medical diagnoses and psychological diagnoses. Sex life, we have transsexuals, we've got criminals. We have the charts of criminals and their victims. So if you want to do synastry between the two, you can do that. Religion, birth, death, 6 pages of vocations. People who are famous really use their charts well. We also have 125 different types of events. So we have 17 crimes, 15 ways to die. We have when you got ill, when you got well, when you had a depressive episode with something Saturn going on, manic episode, something Jupiter going on, psychotic episode, something Neptune going on, relationship life, from when you meet a significant person through your having a wonderful time, have a bad time. You can add or change anything in this data bank. You can import people that you know.
How many people are here inside?
20,000.
20,000 people. For example, can I find out who would be my perfect victim?
If you have the astrological signature for your perfect victim, we can go find them. I want to look at Venus aspects. And so I click Venus, okay. And it will take the people that I know, or famous people, whichever you wish, and it'll show me Venus to Moon, and come on, okay. So here we have Venus to Moon by semi-sextile, sextile, square.
So let's see a bit more down for this Venus opposing, the Venus opposing Moon. James Joyce, William Blake, okay.
How is this Venus in Sagittarius going to work with this Moon in Cancer? Well, the Moon in this opposition is going to have more essential dignity, so we imagine that this Moon is going to dominate this Venus in this opposition. That's something of a learning, and you need to go to your lecture and you want to come back later?
Here as a client.
I think this will give the humans, the consciousnesses of the future, a more cosmic orientation, and then perhaps if there are other intelligences out there, then they will come up and say hello. Because I think right now we're under quarantine. We're too dangerous a thing to let out right now. We're unbalanced. But the geometries, the proportions which this represents, the understandings can not only be used on a personal level, and that's I think why many people turn to astrology, but can be used on a highly metaphysical and philosophical level for countries, for ethnic groups, for future plans, for technologies, for totally changing our relationship in the material world, because it's not as solid and three-dimensional as we think. And usually, if you don't make those changes willfully, they are given to you as hard lessons. And I don't think that humanity can prolong its adolescence too much longer. We have too many dangerous toys to play with that can get way out of hand if we don't get the emotional and spiritual maturity, and I think it's ready. So I say this is a wonderful eclipse and a wonderful opportunity to learn these things. There are people really great with geometries of the soul and the spirit, and I think it's the wave of the future.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you from the Peanut Gallery. And yours is the future, guys, so go out there and have some fun with it and learn all you can.
Astrology is now taking its place as a single session therapy. We are relating the horoscope to the individual reality being lived by the client. Our empathy and skills with our client must grow into creative listening and dialogue, so that the planetary archetypes can take their place in individual pantheons.
And here we have this incredible eclipse dividing the 90s from the first decade of the next century. This supports my reading of the eclipse, that we are approaching a watershed, and that very shortly we will see the beginning of a structural revolution, cultural revolution, social revolution in the developed countries, very similar to and comparable to intensity to the 60s, but probably quite different in the means. Doesn't necessarily have to be drugs, doesn't necessarily have to be rock and roll, doesn't necessarily have to be any of those things, but a general, widespread social disaffection with what the powers that be want us to be. So between these two phenomena, I am actually putting myself on record as making a prediction that within the next 10 years there will be something very similar to the 60s again, just as this period has been very similar to the 50s. Tremendous economic boom, people working very hard, a general tendency toward conservatism, although not extreme conservatism. The 50s were more extreme by a long margin, but everybody sort of lockstep, going along, doing what they think needs to be done, and not ever really looking at why. Then all of a sudden, huge numbers of people are going to ask why. So I predict that the next decade is going to be the decade of why. Thank you very much.
So as we move slightly more step by step to organising ourselves more, professionalising ourselves more, organising ourselves more, there are always strong voices raised to caution against maybe slipping into developing some sort of monolithic astrology. So we all recognise the problems of that, because if there is no one single astrology, to try and create a monolithic astrology would be counterproductive, intellectually counterproductive for everybody.
I'm speaking for astrology as a secret art. I'm speaking somewhat personally. I like being part of the people who are not in the center of the polis, in the center of the establishment. The people who believe that what they are doing is reality and it's law. I am comfortable on the wall between the wilderness or that which is forming and the center, that which is reality. I think astrology has a great power when it stands slightly outside the established order. I've noticed that when it becomes part of the established order, historically, it ends up believing in itself too much. And that believing in itself, others believe in it too. And all that belief turns into something that falsifies itself. And then it crashes. It becomes corrupt. It gets part of the political system where things other than a deep integrity rule how people practice it. I think when we're slightly outside, not quite accepted, we have more power to touch people where other places can't touch them. People who cannot feel completely comfortable in the center of the established order. People for whom things are missing, and so they look elsewhere to see what is perhaps reality outside the accepted conventional reality. It may become a public science one day, but I hope to be very old when it does, because I'm happy to be part of those who stand on the wall between the center of the city, where everyone knows the rules and laws, and the chaos beyond, taking messages in from other dimensions perhaps, and answering things in people that they cannot have answered from the center. I think we affect people at all levels of society. All of us who have been practicing for any length of time have clients who are right at the heart of the center, right deep in the establishment. And all of us, those who are working with love and integrity for our art, all do our best to bring them into a wider universe where they're connected to something greater. I think we have a powerful effect slightly outside. We touch things in them and give a fullness to their life that they cannot feel when they're all operating in the reality system. And so I think it works beautifully as a secret art. People can come to us secretly. They know we'll never tell anything about what they're asking, what they're yearning for, and then they can go back into the center of the polis and live their life. I think as a secret art, we operate best and fall least into temptation of the corruption that can happen when we get too right, too there, too central.